Hello, and welcome back. I'm Greg, and we're going to continue today with part three of our investigation into the concept of authority. And today it's about the problem of reality. And one of the things authority puts to us, obviously, is that it's somehow more closely in touch with reality than we are. It knows more than we do. This is its claim. In order to investigate that claim, of course, we have to not only question authority itself, as we've been working to try to figure out how to do, but we also have to investigate specific claims that authority or any other authority is actually making. Okay? Most kinds of authority do not rest themselves on an overall claim, right? Like a godlike authority, where that authority source says, okay, well, we know everything about everything. Most authority, of course, is much smaller than that. In some ways, that makes it easier to deal with because we're not looking at some kind of grand claim that no matter what we think or what we say, that this authority knows better. But at the same time, it makes it more difficult than that abstract authority, because if someone comes up and tells you that, okay, I'm an expert in this or that, and the detail and the work involved in becoming that expert authority, hardly any of it are we even aware of, right? We have no idea about the depths that and breadth that these authorities have, right? And even myself as a philosopher am not above and try to avoid, but I cannot entirely avoid making those kinds of claims for myself, because here I am asking you to take it on my part and on my behalf that we're going to dig into and dismantle and even deconstruct, excuse the term, the concept of authority itself. And then the question is, okay, well, what authority does the philosopher have to do that? And we have to sort of say, okay, well, let's make sure that we don't neglect to keep that question open as well. So let's dig into that part of it together, the problem of reality and its relationship to authority and vice versa, and how authority comes to be able to make a claim regarding the world, that claim which seems to be more powerful or more persuasive than the claims that we ourselves can make from our own experience. Okay, so most saliently for the interpretation of text, which is what we've been working on for now, the difference between fiction and nonfiction sort of comes to the fore. Both are morganatic in their relationship to their more cosmic parentage. What do I mean by that? Well, they're the children of the mistress, as it were, Morgana. So in that imagery, in that kind of metaphor, we can think about fiction and nonfiction as being almost the unwanted or at least unrecognized children of this wider and ultimate authority. On the fiction side, we find the myths of the everyday. There are no true heroes, only those who fight the good fight. There is also no pure evil, only the villain, who is still a human being first and not a demon. Of course, in phantasmagorical fiction, myth once again inveiges itself into the narrative, but this is not as serious a problem as it first looks to be. In exposing the villain, the hero attests not only to his adversary's humanity, but as well to his own. For it is the latter which has allowed the hero to decipher the methodical madness which the villain puts forward as if it were a sign of the superhuman. Okay, that's one of the patent things that villains do, of course, in fiction, is that they pretend that they're more than they actually are. Okay? In demonizing them, as we also do in real life to the people we don't like, we're actually giving them exactly what they want. Hence my comment about, in the other video, making sure we treat politicians as human beings no matter their druthers. In general, however, fiction performs without any mythic overtone, the sleight of hand necessary to convince the reader of at least the plausible reality of what is in fact not real. Myth itself did not have this challenge, for it purported to speak empirically of the other world. Thus, in its own mind, myth is real. It is simply that this is a reality unknown, and perhaps also unknowable to mortal consciousness, at least not fully knowable. And so, unlike myth, fiction's task is not to present an alternate reality, but rather to mimic life as we do know it. It is the semblance of reality that fiction musters to itself that allows it to take place as if it were real, this time relying on the reality that everyone knows about and indeed lives within. This is the social world, and to some extent the life world, if the narrative in question strays into the more profound territory of structure and symbol, the kinds of institutional and even archetypical relations which embrace all of us. In this, fiction nods to myth without itself going fully over into it. The mythic language was that of the ideals, the archetypes, and the forms. Every figure and every event was symbolic of a wider universe, and allegorical metaphor ruled each moment. Fiction, by contrast, brings what is symbolic into the maelstrom of daily life. Indeed, living on presents us with few other venues wherein we ourselves can discern the symbolic life, and thus fiction in literature preserves a most crucial link between individuated experience and that shared by many, if not most, human beings over the life course. In this, fiction takes its place amongst the other forms of art, many of which we will be examining hermeneutically later on in other episodes. If fiction strikes away from myth, as must the child of the mistress leave the estate, non-fiction follows a similar tack. Here it eschews a too serious discourse, that of the sciences, to once again communicate the reality of everyday life in quotidian terms. If fiction presents a recognizable reality that is at once unreal, non-fiction attempts to express the reality of the real. It is, in this sense, reportage, and thus not quite narrative. Non-fiction has a different method than does fiction, but its challenge is almost the same, to reveal the deeper modes of being that populate the reality of which we are mostly aware only by way of its surface features. As a deliberate parallax to any scholarly study of human relations, non-fiction, which as a category includes the scientific but without embodying it whole, the analytic pursuit in general non-fiction is that of ingratiating the storyteller to a reality which is already present, rather than asking the narrator to imagine one as a simile or metaphor thereto. In so doing, the surfaces of the social world, those whose sole purpose is the civil and expected, begin to open up, revealing what at first looks like very much like some other world. If fiction is a refraction of the known world, non-fiction discloses the relationship between that known world's veneer and its more substantive stuff. What we are to understand through non-fiction is that the surface of the social world is itself a reflection of the life world, held more deeply and more fully. We can see now how both fiction and nonfiction can help us begin to dig into the structure of authority itself, right? And its claims about the world, because both fiction, on the one hand, presents us a kind of not alternate reality, but a sense that it's another take on a plausible or possible reality where things happen that did not actually happen, but that allows us to imagine what could happen in our world. And then nonfiction is an investigation into the reality, the deeper reality of the world that we think we know about. So, if science studies the nature of culture, to borrow from Alfred Kroeber, the anthropologist, and as William James put it in the subtitle to his most famous work, is as well a study of human nature, general nonfiction describes far more than it analyzes. Even this lesser mode of reality writing does, however, work through much that is not obvious, either at first glance, certainly not by simply living on the surface. It is able to do this kind of work because it employs a form of interpretation, one that begins to understand the social world as a kind of unique text. History is its model of, if not model for, this hermeneutic. What history records for the most part actually occurred in some form or other. In this, it was simply yet precisely a part of reality as it was. At the time, this was the present, and we, gazing at it from afar, are placed nearer that now long past present through its record. Nonfiction attempts the same trick. No matter the time period in question, the description contained in this or that reportage has the function of displacing what we now take to be the present in its presence. Nonfiction enhances the present if its topic be de jure, and augments our sense of the past if not. This is something fiction cannot itself do, for we are always aware that fictional narrative is in fact not real, no matter how convincing of reality it may be or become. Yet it is this very quality of art and literature that carries an unwanted shadow along with it, the problem of distinguishing fact and fiction, fantasy and reality. Now, and right here we can just pause for a moment and note that when authority kind of stakes its claim, one of the things it does is it says that we should believe in its distinction between fact and fiction, right? That it's already decided for us what is real and what isn't. So right at that point, we can sort of say, okay, wait a second. Is that how I would have made that same decision, right? So at once we feel we can rely on nonfiction to perform this task, but what if fiction is being paraded under the masquerade of its opposite number? Misinformation is merely a mistake. Someone somewhere or other got it wrong, and it is up to us to vet such outcomes as we can. But disinformation is another matter. Here, there is a deliberate attempt at obfuscation at best, downright deceit at worst. It is only through an interpretive angle that includes the hermeneutics of suspicion that we can traverse this mind terrain. History contains much of the first, and we assume, observing a great deal of it in our own time, at least a modicum of the second as well. Misinformation has its origins in the basic limitations of communication and witness that were a part of human life up until very recently. Word of mouth is notoriously unreliable if one wants to communicate a precise message, unaltered, over space, in whatever present was at hand. The marathon event in the Olympics is, of course, based upon the 26-plus miles from the site of that great battle to Athens, and precisely because of the problem of oral communication at a distance, just one messenger completed this run, reporting victory over the Persians and then fatally collapsing. Or, so we are told. We feel we can trust historical period reportage more than we can that of the purely oral prehistory. The marathoner's message was instantly repeated, written down, made immortal in Herodotus, and so onwards. And yet, given the drama and stakes involved in the battle itself, one which is cited as being on a short list of those that saved Western civilization from something other to itself, Loire Valley and Lepanto are two other examples on that list. We can be reserved in both our acclaim and our belief regarding anything to do with its aftermath. And this distance is both necessary to interpretation and to much of life in general, past or present. For at the end of each day, we must tell ourselves that what occurred simply happened, and anything further we make of it is, one could say, on us. History, then, retains a living force because it is we, the living, who encounter it. Tradition, in the main, the unspoken of history, presents to us a like dynamic. We are first submerged in it and then begin to challenge it when our own individuation presents itself. There is a winnowing process for each generation to undergo, a learning, a challenging, a testing, and a reworking. We have already seen how this thesis of the past comes up against the antithesis of the living present. Futurity is the very synthesis of this confrontation, and therefore the dialectical impetus at work is one that proceeds temporally. If the present can be said to phenomenologically be adding to the past each moment, then in doing so it subtracts from the future. We generally take the future to be an open field, not necessarily one infinite in scope or length, but at least indefinite. This subtraction, then, is not a cause for alarm, as if we are slowly but surely draining the future away from itself, so that at some further point we will have quite literally run out of time. Rather, we attempt to make of our own time the living present, residing with our contemporaries into a kind of balance, which holds the scales between past and future. The weight of the past is surely great, but since the future is, by definition, as yet unknown, we can only guess at its coming gravitas. And the past does not merely contain dead weight after all. To make this kind of distinction requires a serious hermeneutic effort. For most of us by far live in the present as if it were still partly the past. Okay, now think about that for a second. That is a huge challenge right there. That most of us live in the present as if it were still partly the past. And this is not just a question of our own experiential memory, okay, and how we go about our individual lives. This is a cultural, a societal, and a very human question. There is no human life that is without aspects of the tradition, and its suasion operates in ways sometimes so occluded and unnoticed that the metaphoric remark regarding the ways of God being mysterious is well placed within this less mythic dynamic. That fiction expresses this occlusive being as symbolic of the mundanity of human affairs, and non-fiction attempts to reveal the inner workings thereof while keeping it real, in turn suggests that we who are present, can only be so, have developed some sophisticated methods of negotiating with the profound presence of the past in the present. The question for each of us then is, are they sophisticated enough? Even if we do manage to come to learn all of them in a serious manner. That itself, of course, is a challenge. But even after that, let's say starting around age 12 or so, when we start to realize that not everything we're being fed every day is necessarily good for us, healthy for mind or body or spirit or any of that sort of thing. And then we start to say, okay, wait a second, do I really want to be eating this stuff every single day of my life? Okay, what can I do about it? That's in part what this is all about, and I hope you'll enjoy me. I hope you'll join. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, but I hope you'll join me for part 4, and I would definitely welcome you to do that. It's not the most enjoyable journey, okay, well, just to return to that word for a second. For sure, it's something that is a challenge, and I'm asking each of you to take that challenge on, because it's part of your human birthright. You not only deserve the challenge, and it is a gift to us, it's also this task which, as human beings, we are in a collective duty to undertake. So I'm here to help you with that, and we'll continue with this work in part 4. See you then.